I'm joined here by my colleague, Melbourne reporter Holly Edwards-Smith, who was in the lockup with me earlier. So, Holly, you've been getting a bit of a reaction from a number of interest groups, and there's been a lot said about the airport rail decision. What have you heard?
Well, one of the major themes that stood out from conversations from stakeholders about this budget was that it was described as a Weight Watchers budget. So with that, you do have groups that have been quite happy about funding announcements, but in the same light, they're quite disappointed that there is a lot of funding lacking in certain areas. In terms of the airport rail link, that didn't really get a mixed response today. Instead, we heard from the Tourism Council and Public Transport Users Association, and they believe that an underground station is the only way that this should be going ahead. They're in agreement with Melbourne Airport on that, who have released a statement following comments from the Treasurer today saying that they were part of a consortium that offered $7 billion for an underground station, and this is something that the government rejected, and it doesn't seem like the government will be turning their position on that anytime soon. The Treasurer, Tim Pallas, saying today that that is not going to happen. He said that this will be pushed out, like you said, by 4 years now, not likely to be completed until at least the 2030s, 2033 at the very earliest at this stage. Let's hear from some of those stakeholder groups.
Underground is obviously better, but at this stage I think most passengers would welcome any airport rail station, as long as it's well connected to the airport and it is a seamless connection.
We have lobbied for that station to be underground. That's the right place to have it. If you want to be a world-class destination, you can't have people walking out of your airport and probably having to take a bus to carry their bags to the rail station. It needs to be underground.
Simon, so some other groups that were quite happy with announcements today include funding for eating disorders. However, there was conversation around how more work does need to be done, particularly around that sort of area as well as in the mental health field. There's also been discussions about how there's disappointment around no reforms for the justice system, particularly in how that affects people who have been the victims of sexual assault. There have been some mixed responses about sick pay guarantees for casuals and that now being scrapped, as well as, of course, a welcome response from school groups who say they welcome that $400 one-off state student payment.
Yeah, and they'll be building a lot more schools too. Holly, thank you. I thought it was an interesting moment in the lockup when we got to ask the Treasurer about debt, and there was a little bit of a light-hearted moment when I put it in terms, you know, for the future generations.
Treasurer, let's talk about debt. 187.8 billion by 2028. I think I asked you a similar question in this very room 4 years ago. How long is that going to take our grandkids to pay off?
Well, the first thing, I'm glad you're worried about grandkids. I didn't think you were that old, Simon, but
30. We only hope.
We all aspire to good things in the future. I often hear people say, well, we can't afford to build Project X at the moment. We should delay it. We know the longer we delay these big projects, the further and further out of reach they become. We're effectively making a conscious decision to give up on the future.